Kia ora everyone. This is going to be a long video, so I don't expect everyone to sit through the whole thing, but it's something I've been tossing up whether to do for a while now, and I've decided that I think I do want to. A few months ago, I started writing. I started writing about my health journey from kind of when my first symptom appeared up until present day, and it's kind of my story in great detail. It's very personal. There's some, sensitive subjects in it, and things that I think probably need to be talked about a little bit more these days. Things that we don't talk about very often. Things that I'm still not really comfortable talking about, but I do think it's the right thing. The reason I started writing was for a few reasons. The first reason, it's quite therapeutic, I find. With my illness, I haven't been able to do kind of the normal things I would do to look after my mental health. I haven't been able to exercise, go to the gym, do sports, hobbies, things like that. So the next best thing for me I found was writing. The second reason is kind of just raising awareness. If I can tell my story, spread the word about these kind of illnesses that, to be fair, a lot of people don't really know about. Before I was ill, I'd never heard of things like chronic fatigue syndrome and things like that. So if I can kind of just spread the word to anybody, raise a little bit more awareness, then it's a win for me. And third reason is similar to the second reason. When I was really sick last year, one of the things that I leaned into for comfort was listening to the stories of other people that were going through or had gone through something similar. It really kind of gave me hope and made me feel not so lonely in those times, realizing that there were other people out there that did understand what it was like and that were going through the same thing. So if my story can reach somebody who may need that kind of comfort and that companionship, then that's a huge win for me. And that's what's really led me to want to share my story. So it's quite long. It's definitely not perfect, but it's in my words and it's my experience, and I'm going to share it. I've always told people that I've been sick for 4 years, but my story actually starts 6 years ago. This is my journey from my first symptom till present day. One afternoon, 6 years ago, me and a group of boys from work were playing a game of touch down the park. I was always reasonably fit and athletic, and enjoyed some friendly competitive touch footy with the boys. I remember during the game feeling unusually unfit, and my lungs were burning after about 10 minutes. I took a 2-minute rest, got back into the game, and had to rest again shortly afterwards. My lungs were on fire, and it didn't feel right. I chalked it up to working big hours and just simply overdoing it recently, so I got in my car and left. I was waiting for the burning in my lungs to subside, but it didn't go away. 5 hours later, when I was heading to bed, my lungs were still burning. I went to sleep, woke up the next day, and felt fine. My lungs were back to normal, and I carried on with my day, never to think about it again. Or for a few years, at least. Fast forward 2 years to the beginning of 2020. I was back on a health buzz, and I was running a lot. I had decided today to do some hill sprints up behind my old house. It was a normal session, and I was feeling good. I decided to do one last rep and really push myself hard. I got to the top of the hill and stopped. My lungs were burning, I was breathing heavy, and my legs felt like jelly. All pretty normal things to be feeling after repeatedly sprinting up and down a big hill. I turned and wandered off back down the hill towards my house. My breathing returned to normal, my legs regained strength, but my lungs still burned. I instantly recalled feeling the strange sensation before. This time was different though. Something didn't feel right. It is hard to describe in words exactly how I felt, but I suddenly had an undeniably heavy sense of dread deep in my stomach. Like I knew something was terribly wrong, but I couldn't quite pinpoint what. This feeling came on very suddenly, about 5 to 10 minutes after I finished my run, and I couldn't shake it for the rest of the day. I went to bed that night, lungs still burning, and this uneasy sense of doom still resting in the pit of my stomach. I remember feeling a little bit disassociated from reality, like I was in a bit of a dream. It was a weird feeling and it wasn't nice. I awoke the next day to find that these strange symptoms were still present. In fact, they had gotten worse. As well as my lungs feeling like they had just run a marathon, I now had a super annoying feeling of something being stuck in my throat. It felt like a ball of phlegm lodged in the bottom of my throat near my chest. And no matter how many times I tried to clear my throat, it wouldn't go away. My burning lungs had also evolved into a bit of a sore, croaky chest. I also just felt really run down, so I assumed this was some weird flu or something. The complaint in my chest was pretty uncomfortable, so I made a doctor's appointment. I didn't know it at the time, but this was the beginning of a never-ending cycle of dead-end doctor visits. I went to the appointment, and the doctor told me I had a chest infection. I had never had a chest infection before, so this made sense to me. I was prescribed a 2-week course of antibiotics and sent on my way. I went back to work, still unwell, but thinking I was on the mend with these antibiotics. 2 weeks passed, and I still felt exactly the same. The only thing that had changed was the sense of weird dread had faded to a distant murmur in the background. It was still there, but faint. I went back to the doctor. My chest had gotten worse, and the pains were getting more severe. My stomach was also starting to hurt, and the feeling of something being stuck in my throat was driving me absolutely crazy. The doctor decided this time that I had a sinus infection. This one didn't really make sense to me. My sinuses felt normal, and I didn't really understand how that was giving me aching chest pains or a cramping stomach. But she reckoned my sinuses were red, so like the good boy I was, I complied, and was sent on my way with a new 2-week course of antibiotics. They also took a few bloods this time, I think to check for any sort of infection. After about a week into my course of antibiotics, the doctor rang me to say my bloods came back showing no sign of infection and to stop taking the antibiotics. So once again, I found myself back at the doctor's. I was finding myself become more run down as each day passed, and my doctor visits were ending with nothing but me feeling extreme frustration. I was being told I was depressed, stressed, and indirectly being made to feel like it was all in my head. I knew none of these things were true. I wasn't depressed, certainly not at the beginning anyway. My symptoms were very physical, and I felt like I was always fighting just to get the doctors to believe me. The months started passing by, and I was just going in circles with the doctors. My symptoms were still developing. I still had all the previously mentioned symptoms, but I was starting to develop a new symptom in my legs. They started to feel extremely weak, like jelly, and I just always felt like I needed to sit down. This made work really difficult, and I was starting to really struggle. I was never feeling rested. I would wake up every morning feeling just as tired and exhausted as I did when I went to bed. My chest hurt, my stomach hurt, I had a lump stuck in my throat, my legs were weak, and my mind was feeling foggy and confused. I felt like I was at the doctor's every other day. I was getting an absurd amount of blood tests done, with every result coming back fine. One day at work, I was feeling very weak, and my chest was having sharp stabbing pains. I tried to push through these, as these symptoms were a common theme in my daily life, but on this particular day, it was worse than normal, and I felt like my legs were going to collapse. I let somebody know, and next thing I knew, I was being rushed to hospital. I think they were concerned about chest pains being a heart attack or something like that. But after a couple of hours at hospital, they couldn't find anything wrong with me, and I was sent home. I spent the next doctor's visit begging to be seen by somebody else. I had been seeing the same doctor for about 8 months now, and after her last suggestion that I might just have a bad case of indigestion, I had completely lost faith. Reluctantly, she agreed and referred me to a breathing specialist with the idea that I might have sleep apnea. It was also under the condition that it wouldn't be funded and I would have to pay for it myself, which I was fine with. So for the next 4 to 5 months, I was frequently visiting a breathing specialist in Christchurch, learning how to breathe again. I was still working, still exercising where I could, but my body was deteriorating, and it was becoming obvious to the people around me. Work was becoming more than just work. It was an excruciating mountain to climb, with each day presenting a taller mountain than the last. My legs felt like noodles, with determination being the only thing holding them up. I always felt tired, like I haven't slept for 3 days kind of tired, and my body constantly felt like it was fighting a nasty viral infection. Because of all this, I was starting to crack emotionally. My personality was changing and I was breaking down. I would find myself at work crying for no particular reason other than pure exhaustion. I was confused, frustrated, angry, and sick. I just wanted to get better. I finished seeing the breathing specialist, and to my huge surprise, I still felt like shit. I was starting to miss a lot of days at work, and it was becoming clear that if I didn't get better soon, I wouldn't be able to do this job for much longer. This on its own was very disheartening for me. Anybody who knows me knows how much I loved my job at the meatworks, and the camaraderie me and the people I worked with had was special. So having my hand forced to leave the job I loved made me feel defeated, and it sunk in that this illness was starting to win. Little did I know, things hadn't even begun to get bad yet. It had now been about a year and a half of chronic illness, with no answers. During this whole time, I hadn't really told anybody about what I was going through, apart from my wife, Kelly, my parents, and obviously the doctors. I had kind of told people in small snippets that I had been a little bit sick lately, but that I was getting on top of it. This was mostly just to workmates, as it was obvious something was wrong with how many days I was having off. I never told them the severity of what I was really going through though. I found it so hard to explain to people what was wrong when I didn't even know myself. It's a weird illness. On the outside, I looked like my healthy young self, but on the inside, I felt like I was dying. I would go to work, struggle to get through the day without collapsing, and then as soon as I got home, I would slump into the couch, absolutely destroyed. It's hard to find the words to describe the fatigue. It was more than fatigue. It was like every fibre in my body had been pushed to its limit and beyond. I was so tired it physically hurt. And I would wake up every morning with a full 8 hours sleep doing nothing to replenish my energy. If I had to, I could put on a brave face and act normal to the people around me, but inside it was killing me. Because of this, I just stopped wanting to be around people. It was just much easier this way. I've always been a naturally extroverted person. I love being around people, talking, joking, living an energetic life. So feeling like that was being taken away from me really tore me in two. I was becoming a prisoner in my own body. I hated it. Inevitably, my job became too much for me to handle. Kelly, myself, and the kids had just been to visit my dad in Timaru. With my current job becoming too much, we tried to turn this situation into a positive opportunity and moved to Timaru with the idea of a fresh start. Nobody really knew I was ill, so it was easy to disguise our sudden decision to move as just an opportunity for change and somewhere better to raise our kids. The schooling and sports was much better in Timaru, as was the healthcare for myself, so it made perfect sense. Kelly also wasn't too mad about being much closer to a Kmart. So we packed up, sold our house, had one last memorable shinny, which took me about 2 months to recover from, and moved to Timaru. I got a job as an apprentice butcher. Same line of work I was used to, but much less physically demanding. I also registered myself to a medical clinic and found myself a GP who, after just one appointment with, was already the best doctor I had spoken to yet. Things were looking up. The kids started in their new schools. Kelly was busy renovating, turning our house into a home, and I was working and resting. I was still very ill, but with a new positive mindset. I was quickly diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome after my new GP had referred me to go see a specialist. I was happy to finally have some sort of diagnosis after almost 2 years of no answers. At the same time though, I wasn't satisfied with this answer. Yes, chronic fatigue syndrome made sense to me, but at the same time, I didn't feel it was a true diagnosis, but more of a symptom itself. Something had to be causing the chronic fatigue, right? Overall though, it was a positive step in the right direction. Fortunately, my GP thought similar to me and wanted to find out exactly what was causing these symptoms too. Unfortunately, my symptoms were still developing, and the most sinister one yet was beginning to rear its ugly head. I had started to feel a sensation, predominantly in my left arm and left leg. It was a strange sensation. At first, it felt like my arm and leg were losing circulation. They felt weak, but in a different way to the rest of my body. It felt like the connection from my arm and leg to my brain was being severed. It was quite uncomfortable, but I was used to being uncomfortable. Just another symptom to the long list of symptoms, I thought to myself. Life went on in Timaru. I was working full-time still, and at the same time working closely with my GP, trying to figure out what was wrong. I was struggling, but my boss was aware that I had chronic fatigue syndrome, and he was very understanding. That, mixed with the fact that my new job was far less demanding, made so that even though I was struggling, I was managing to get through most days at work. About a year passed. My symptoms were still very much the same. Definitely not any better, but they hadn't gotten too much worse either. The only thing that had really changed was that strange sensation in my left side was becoming more and more uncomfortable. But aside from that, we were getting by. I was still getting all sorts of tests done by my GP, but they were all still coming back fine. During this year, I even managed to play a season of cricket with my brothers and dad. It was grueling on my body, and I'm not even sure how I got through some of the games, but it felt so good to be out there with the boys, and I loved it so much, I figured I would just deal with the consequences. Reflecting on the season after it had finished, I thought to myself, if I stay sick for the rest of my life, at least I will have these memories of being out there playing cricket with, at times, 3 of my brothers and my old man. Those games were special to me, and I'll cherish those memories forever, especially the 4-wicket bag and 78 not out to win the game. I'll be talking about that one for a while. But as the theme of my life had been in the last few years, every time I was on a high, life gripped its sharp claws into my waist and dragged me down twice as low as I had been before. This is where things were about to get real. I had been working as a butcher apprentice for about 1.5 years, and my second block course was coming up. The strange sensation in my left side had slowly but surely started becoming more and more uncomfortable as the months went by. My block course was a 3-day course in Christchurch, which I was staying in a motel for. I had been feeling a little bit more fatigued than usual lately, but it wasn't uncommon for me to have these sort of symptom flare-ups, so I didn't think too much of it. I woke up on the first day of my course feeling absolutely ruined. Each limb felt like it weighed 100 kilos. My mind felt foggy, like I couldn't focus on anything, and my brain simply felt like it was malfunctioning, like I couldn't recall information, and my memory was just not working. It's safe to say I was feeling pretty broken. I remember feeling frustrated that this was happening on these particular important days. For the next 3 days, every morning I awoke, somehow I felt worse than the day before. I have no idea how I made it through the course. It's all a bit of a blur, to be honest. I remember getting home and telling Kelly that something was wrong. Obviously, I had been sick for a long time, and I was very familiar with my symptoms, but this was different. The strange feeling on my left side had gone from being uncomfortable to agonizingly unbearable. It felt as though somebody had tied ropes around my limbs and yanked on them as tight as they could until my limbs were detaching from my body. It is hard to describe in words how bad my arm and leg felt, but I can tell you it felt like torture. I had had brain fog before, but not like this. This time it was like my brain had completely shut down. I was struggling to form basic sentences. I couldn't think. My short-term memory was completely gone. Kelly would be talking to me, and I could hear the words she was saying, but I couldn't understand her. The fatigue was crushing. I couldn't stand for more than a few minutes without almost collapsing and needing to sit down. Light hurt my eyes, and any loud noise would send a physical shudder of pain down my entire body. I'm not exaggerating when I say there was about 100 more symptoms, all as bad as the next. But I won't go into detail for all of them. You get the picture. I got home from my block course on a Thursday, and by Sunday it was obvious I wasn't capable of working. Kelly, being the superhero she is, quickly took action and began full-time work so I could rest. For the next 3 months of my life, somehow every morning I woke up, I felt a little bit worse than the last. My doctor and myself had no idea why my health had deteriorated so drastically and so quickly. He put me on a bunch of new medications to try and give me some sort of relief, but everything I tried I would have a bad reaction to, and it would only make me worse. The feeling in my left limbs was beginning to quite literally drive me crazy, and I felt like I was losing my mind. The human body can only take so much physical torment before the mind starts to look for ways out. And that began happening. I guess my brain was trying to shield me from the intolerable amount of pain and discomfort I was in. I could still feel everything, but it felt like I was in a weird dream. I felt completely disassociated from reality, like I was watching my life play through my eyes, but from a distance. It's hard to explain this experience without sounding completely crazy, and I understand that. It's just what happened. I'm not going to go into detail too much of what happened over the next 3 months. These were the darkest days of my life, and I don't like to revisit these memories too much. But I do want to share a story with you from these times to give a bit of context to what those days were like, living in this awful nightmare. It was the All Blacks' first match of the World Cup against France. My alarm went off at 6 to watch the game, but I hadn't even fallen asleep yet. My left side had aggressively flared up, and I had just laid there sobbing all night, unable to fall asleep. I got in my dressing gown and sat on the couch. I felt terrible. I felt like I had the worst case of influenza, combined with a fatigue that felt like gravity was trying to push me through the ground. And my left limbs felt as though they were being squeezed so tightly they were going to detach from my body. The game started, but by the end of it, I couldn't even watch TV. I didn't have the energy. All I could do was lay there hunched over, letting out the odd involuntary moan. We had an open home that day as we were selling our house, but I couldn't move my body. Kelly had to help me to the car, where she drove us to her sister's, and I lay on a bed there. Something happened to me while I lay there that I struggle to explain. The terrible feeling in my body had been building and building all morning, to the point that I was laying there, begging out loud for it all to end. I just wanted it to stop. I wanted it to go away, and I didn't care how. Just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the horrible feeling that had enveloped my whole body seemed to explode. And then it felt calm. I lay there still for a minute, wondering what had just happened and if it was real. I could still feel my symptoms, but they felt distant. And the horrible feeling that I was fighting some sort of nasty infection turned into a calmness. That calmness turned into happiness, which then turned into complete euphoria. A feeling of ecstasy had completely taken over my body. All of a sudden, I felt like everything was okay. More than okay. I felt great. It was in this moment I decided to stop keeping my illness a secret, and I wrote that status on Facebook, letting everyone know what I was going through. I never realised how much it was affecting me, keeping it all a secret, until I finally decided to tell people. The weight lifted off my shoulders that day was incredible. The response and support from everyone completely washed away the heavy blanket of loneliness that had wrapped itself around me. The comments and messages all meant so much. So again, I want to thank you all. It really helped me. I don't know what happened to me that day. I don't know how to explain it. My unqualified guess is that it was some sort of coping mechanism initiated by my brain. The feeling of euphoria lasted about 30 minutes and slowly faded. By the evening, I was back to being sick, but it was nowhere near as bad as it was in the morning. This day was a turning point for me. For over the next couple of months, I slowly but surely started to regain some strength, and my mind was beginning to clear up. I felt like I was regaining a small fraction of my personality back. I even managed to go to Hokitika during the Christmas holidays and have an amazing night out with my friends, something I, a few months prior, would have never imagined possible. I love my kids more than anything in the world, so during those hardest months, having to say no to every excited request to play or to hang out would shatter my heart. Now, having regained a small amount of energy, I can play and be the more involved father I want to be, so for that I'm thankful. Fast forward to today. I'm still not as good as I was before my block course, but I'm way better than what I was during those 3 to 5 dark months. During these last 15 months, I've tried many treatments, some conventional, most unconventional. If anyone has any questions about these treatments, feel free to ask me. I'm always keen to chat. The most important treatment I have tried is the stem cell treatment. I first found out about stem cell therapy after discovering a musician named Ren. Ren went undiagnosed for about 10 years with Lyme's disease and lived through a living hell, something I could relate to. He eventually was offered a stem cell transplant, and it essentially cured him to an extent. Although I was tested for Lyme's disease, and it's not what I have, my symptoms are practically identical to those of people who have Lyme's, so I figured can't hurt to try. I had heard it was super expensive and I wasn't even sure if it was accessible in New Zealand, but I googled it and sure enough there was a clinic down in Queenstown. From the moment I became sick, I was always very determined and motivated to get better. And the more sick I got, the more motivated I became. I love life too much to watch it waste away. So as soon as I found the clinic in New Zealand, I applied. And fortunately, my application was accepted. I didn't know how exactly I was going to pay for it, as I hadn't worked for a long time and we didn't have much money. But I just knew we would make it work. We went to the bank and luckily they agreed to give us a loan. We didn't know how we were going to pay it back, but it didn't matter. I was getting the treatment and I was excited. We would figure the rest out. Enter Zach Robinson. Zach had proposed the idea to me before about a GoFundMe kind of thing to raise the money for the treatment. I had shut the idea down. I didn't like relying on other people for help. I've always looked after myself financially and I was proud of that. It's a Kiwi thing, I guess, struggling to accept help. It's something I still feel uncomfortable about. But Zach was a good mate. He could see through the bullshit and he knew I needed help. You can imagine my surprise when I opened Facebook and seen a picture of my big head with a donation tab underneath it. It was overwhelming to say the least. I just hope one day I can be in a position where I can truly show everybody how appreciative I am. It meant the world to me and Kelly. Cheers, Zach, and everyone else involved. It's been just over 3 months since I received the stem cell treatment. I haven't noticed any changes yet, but it can take up to 6 months for things to start working, so it's definitely not a write-off yet. I'm still hopeful. Recently, we have also had some big discoveries as to what might be causing all of this. My doctor came up with the theory that this all may stem from head trauma I had when I was young, mixed with a very complicated and traumatic birth. I had a lot of concussions and head injuries in my teenage years, and when I was born, my fat head got stuck and my neck got put out of place, breaking my mum's tailbone. Sorry, Mum. The theory is that the chronic fatigue symptoms are being caused by my brain injury, and the uncomfortable sensation in my left limbs are from nerve damage being caused from an injury somewhere in my neck. To test this theory, the doctor tried me on a medication called gabapentin. This targets nerve pain. I started taking it. After the first day, I noticed a change. My left limbs felt about 5% more calm. Not much, but I could feel a difference. After a week, it was 50% better. This was amazing. For the first time since I became ill, I had found something that was working to give me relief. This also proved the doctor's theory about the nerve damage to be true. We are finally getting somewhere. We're finally starting to figure out what is wrong with me. I've been taking the gabapentin for about 2 months now, and the horrible feeling in my left side is about 80% better. I still have all the other symptoms, the fatigue, etc., but to at least calm down this one symptom, the worst one of them all, is a huge win for me. My doctor referred me to a neurologist straight away, so I am currently waiting for that. This is the end of my journey so far, but before I go, I want to say a few words for my wife Kelly. When we first got together, we were young, full of dreams, hopes and ambition. We started off with a bang, built a house, started a family. We were looking forward to everything life had to offer. My illness took all of that away from us, and away from you. I wouldn't have blamed you if you had decided to leave. When I was at my worst, I had nothing to offer you. You had to work, look after the kids, look after me. You had to do everything while I just laid there. Yet you stayed by my side the entire time and supported me unconditionally. I will never forget that, and I will always love you for it. I truly believe I couldn't have made it through without you, so thank you, and I love you. That's all of it. Not sure how I feel sharing that, but it is what it is. Up the wires.